We issued a press release in this case earlier this morning about 51 indictments against 8 individuals that issued yesterday by a grand jury in relation to the death of Daniel Cruz in his murder on March the 10th of 2018. A number of individuals were previously indicted in this investigation for perjury and misleading a police officer, and now additional indictments have come out yesterday, specifically in regards to the death and the murder of Mr. Cruz. At this point, I would stand by the information that we issued in the press release. If there are any additional questions at this time, I may be able to answer. Feel free to ask.
So there's no dates yet for Morales or I believe 2 more others?
Correct.
For arraignment?
Mr. Morales is an individual indicted with murder. He's currently in custody, and his arraignment date has yet to be set. He'll be haved in at a date that's convenient to whatever attorney is appointed to represent him. I'm not sure who that will be. The court will schedule his arraignment, and once we know that date, we'll send that out. Pedro Soto Rodriguez is also an individual that's in custody now. His arraignment date will be set. He will be haved in from a house of correction, and Joshua Ely as well. In addition to those individuals and the 3 that were arraigned today, Mercedes Diaz-Wright, Kimberly Perez, and Matthew Ross, there are 2 other individuals, Alondra Gill and Chelsea Rodriguez, who are currently at large, but they will be sought after and obtained and extradited back to this Commonwealth for arraignment.
Can you speak a little bit about these cases and obviously the incident that happened back earlier this year, just about how big of a case this is and the incident that happened?
Sure. The incident happened 8 months ago, March 10, 2018. It happened in an apartment in Meadowbrook. It was an argument and altercation that involved 3 individuals, which were Daniel Cruz, the victim in this case, Nurka Morales, and Pedro Soto Rodriguez. During an altercation at the apartment in Meadowbrook, Nurka Morales shot and killed Daniel Cruz. That's the allegation of the murder against Mr. Morales. Mr. Morales, Mr. Soto Rodriguez then engaged other individuals that were not at the apartment at the time but were in Meadowbrook apartments, and all of them traveled to that crime scene at that point and began the efforts that essentially began that day and occurred over the next few months, which was to try to conceal this murder and to avoid prosecution for Mr. Morales for Mr. Cruz's murder. As you know, he was found, Mr. Cruz's body was found later that night. He was killed in the morning. His body dump was about 12 hours later on March 10th at a field off of Bridge Lane in Hatfield, where gasoline was poured on his body and he was set on fire. So the people that are charged as accessories to the murder that Mr. Morales committed assisted Mr. Morales in a number of ways. Many of them assisted by helping to burn that body, by pouring that gasoline, by lighting that match. They also cleaned the apartment, cleaned the crime scene of blood. One of them is alleged to have concealed a murder weapon. So many of them participated in various ways. Specifically in regards to Mr. Ely's indictment yesterday, he follows along with some individuals who were previously indicted in the grand jury investigation for perjury. The grand jury investigation of this case began on April the 2nd. It's been ongoing until yesterday. Many witnesses have come in and testified. This was a case that never stopped being investigated that entire time. It was actively pursued by the state police detective unit attached to our office, to the Northwestern District Attorney's office, and also the Northampton Police Department. And we knew we would get here. It took some time, but largely that's because of the efforts of these individuals to conceal this crime, which certainly we've been able to overcome during the course of the investigation.
Now, in terms of uniqueness, when's the last time there was a Northampton murder and murder trial?
That's an excellent question. Maybe my colleagues might have an answer to that. I don't remember, well, Anthony Bay, of course, stands out. Anthony Bay involved a number of arsons in the city of Northampton. He was charged with murder, ultimately pled to a lesser included offense of manslaughter and is serving time in a state prison. I think that's probably the last murder that occurred in Northampton that was prosecuted through the Hampshire Superior Court.
Can you talk at all about how the victim knew the people who are now facing charges?
Sure, they were all known to one another. This was not a stranger crime by any means. They were affiliated with one another. The Meadowbrook apartment complex, there are a lot of individuals, a lot of families, a lot of connections, people. Everyone in Meadowbrook sort of knows one another. Mr. Cruz did not live in Meadowbrook apartments at that time, but he was known to frequent there. He had family and friends that were there, so he knew Mr. Morales and he knew Mr. Soto Rodriguez through the connections through Meadowbrook.
Was there a gang element to this?
Mr. Soto Rodriguez and Mr. Morales and others are alleged to be members of a gang, specifically out of Meadowbrook and Northampton. I wouldn't say that that necessarily is the element to this particular murder, but that is something that we exposed in the course of the investigation.
Can you talk at all about the altercation that ultimately, or the argument that ultimately led to the altercation that ended in Cruz being shot?
Sure. There are conflicting stories of what occurred at the apartment that day, but there was an altercation, primarily first involving Mr. Cruz and Mr. Soto Rodriguez, that then Mr. Morales got involved in by using a firearm that he had illegally in his possession at that time. Any other questions? Okay, thank you.
All right, thanks.
I appreciate it.